Hi guys, welcome to another Road Pilgrim car review, and today we are going to review the all-new BMW M2, which is the car right behind me in baby blue. And this baby blue is actually called Zen Vought Blue, but for all intents and purposes it's a baby blue colored car. And this is a rather interesting car because it is the last M car that you can buy that is still available in rear-wheel drive. So for all you driving purists out there or BMW purists out there, this might be one of the cars to look out for if you're interested in acquiring a new M car. But before we get on with today's review, if you are a driver in Singapore and you're thinking about selling your car for the best price possible or consigning it for the best price possible, be sure to check out the link in the description box below. Through that link, we'll be able to provide you the best possible quote and valuation for your used car. And with that, let's get on with the review. Alright guys, so jumping straight into the review, this is the new BMW M2 in Zen Vought Blue. I think it's an absolutely stunning color, and this is sort of the hero color for this new launch. Of course, the car is available in other eye-catching colors as well, but most of the press units around the world are all using Zen Vought Blue as sort of the hero color. And one thing that is probably the most striking in this particular M2 is the fact that the grille has been sort of downsized, or not say downsized, but it is a little bit smaller than the average M car that you find today, or actually smaller than the average BMW that you find today. And I think it's kind of a cool look. In fact, I think the boxiness of the front end does remind me a little bit of like a DTM car, like an E30 3 Series DTM car, and I think that's a pretty cool look. It does get a little bit of getting used to though. When you first take a look at the car, it like kind of looks like an unfinished product, so to speak, like something that hasn't had something added on yet. But the longer you look at it, the more smart and sporty it looks, and I think generally it's a pretty cool looking car. So here is the front grille, a closer look at the front grille. And if you go to the front of the car, you can see how boxy the dimensions are. It's pretty angular stuff going on here. So even like the radiator grills and below, like you do get this really boxy effect going on there. And then down the side, what you get are actually a staggered set of wheels. So you got 19-inch front wheels and 20-inch rear wheels, and the fronts are actually already pretty fat. So these are 275 35 19. So for a front tire on a car this size, I would say this is a fairly big wheel, and you can feel this when you drive it as well. Later on when I'm driving the car, I will share a little bit more about what I think about how the car handles, but for now let's just take a look at the car and admire its dimensions. In terms of dimensions, BMW says that this car, this M2, is quite similarly sized to a E92 M3. So for those of you who remember E92, this is a very similar setup. So obviously 2 doors, 4 seats, it's a coupe, and in terms of the driving setup as well, this has a rear wheel. This is rear wheel drive only, so a little bit different from the M3s and M5s that you find today, which are all now available with X-Drive and all-wheel drive. So let's go to the back, check out the rear of the car. I think what I like about this entire look is that it does have a little bit of retro vibes going on. I particularly also like the chrome tips at the back here, the quad tips that you see here. So instead of making them all black and carbon fiber-ish, BMW have gone with a chrome look, which I think generally looks quite good. It's like I said, you know, it does have a retro vibe going on here. So the entire car doesn't feel ultra modern, and in a sense, I think there's a little bit of classiness going on here as well, which I quite like. Here is the exterior, the rear. So moving on with the review, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to jump into the car and show you around the cabin before we take the car for a drive. Let's go. Alright, so jumping into the cabin of the BMW M2. I'm going to start the car up so you can listen to the startup noise. So that sort of startup sound is always welcome in my books. generally speaking, if you're gonna start the day with this sort of greeting, I think it's always a nice thing. But anyway, jumping straight into the review, or to cover what you can find inside the BMW M2, I think you'll find that in terms of styling, the M2 looks in line with the current batch of BMW M Car. So you do have this, generally speaking, it looks quite familiar, especially in terms of the center console, in terms of the infotainment unit, digital driver's display, so on and so forth. Of course, you do get some M2 specific stuff, which I'll go through with you later on. But just so we don't miss out on anything, up front here, you've got your infotainment touchscreen unit, and this is of course running OS 8. This is the new OS 8 system. And because this is an M car, a proper M car, you do have your setup menus, which I think is probably the most important menu in an M car. So what you get here is, of course, you have three things you can configure, or three modes you can configure essentially. One is your baseline mode. So this is what you would have, or this is what you'll be using as you drive along regularly from a day-to-day standpoint. And then of course, you've got your M1 configuration and your M2 configuration. For those of you who are not familiar with M1 and M2 configurations, BMW cars have M presets that you can activate using thumb pedals here, shifters here, or buttons so to speak. And these can be preset to your liking in terms of how aggressive you want the car to be. And there are quite a number of customizations you can do with this M setup. So for example, you can tune, or you can adjust your engine response, your transmission settings in terms of your shift speed, your chassis, and how comfortable it's gonna feel, or how harsh it's gonna feel, or how sporty it's gonna feel, your steering, brakes, traction control, and even down to your traction control, you can actually control how much traction control you want available on the car. And then of course there is also the option to choose whether you want your auto start stop and whether you want your M sound amplifier. So for reference, if I turn off the M mode or the M exhaust amplifier, the car, maybe you can't really hear it on camera, but it does settle down a little bit. And when you are driving, it does make a little bit of a difference. But I don't really see why you would want to turn it off, because I think the purpose of buying a car like that in the first place is to enjoy the sportiness that the car offers. Now, aside from the drive mode setups, of course, all your regular functions are available as well. So this is very similar to any other BMW that you will find on the market. Yeah, as you can see. And beside this infotainment unit is of course your digital driver's display, and this is of course controllable through your multifunction steering wheel here. This is a M Sport steering wheel that has these pedal shifters, and actually the rest of the wheel has some carbon inlays as well. Once again, I'm not entirely sure if this is real carbon fiber, but it's possible that it is. I'll verify at a later point whether or not this is actual carbon fiber. Same thing with the other trim items that you can find in the car as well. So on your dashboard, you do have some carbon fiber inlays along with your center console. But once again, I am not entirely sure if this is carbon fiber or if it's just carbon printed. But in any case, around the steering wheel, the functions are very similar to every other BMW you can find on the market right now. Aside from the M presets, of course, the rest of the controls are very similar. So you can actually control what you see on the driver's display. You can actually toggle what sort of display you would like as well. So I'm going to attempt to do it now. So in terms of content, you have an M lap timer that's available to you. You have a reduced view that doesn't show you anything. Journey data, route preview. You can put up a map as well, and you can also put up your whatever setup that you are currently in. It shows you, like, you can choose that to be the primary thing that shows up on the menu. You can also show your engine conditions, which primarily show you engine temp and turbo pressure. There's a TPMS as well, tire pressure monitoring system, that's on board. and there are also sports displays that show you the amount of torque that you're pushing out at any current juncture, along with the horsepower that you're producing. Oh, what's all this going on? Let me see. Okay, go back. Okay, give me a moment. Okay, so now there's also a G meter to show you how hard you're throwing your passenger around, and then of course you've got your media and your radio displays, which I think these are the civilian functions that you don't get, that you also get on other BMWs. But things like the G meter and all that are things that you get only on your on a M car. And aside from that, you can also adjust your heads-up display. So this car does come with a heads-up display, and it also gives you, wait, let me see. It also gives you an option of what you want to display. So there is a reduced view that shows you only your speed, and then there is a directional view that gives you sort of a map, a compass. So this menu is a little bit more limited than what you would get on your infotainment, on your driver's display, but nonetheless it is customizable to your liking. Overall, if you're the kind of person that enjoys thick steering wheels, ones with really thick curves, I think you will enjoy what the BMW M cars have to offer, because the steering wheels are a little bit thicker. If you're familiar with Porsches, the wheels are a little bit thinner, so I think that's really down to personal preference. But in any case, I'm quite used to these wheels as well, as I use one of them in my F10, but not the exact same one, an older generation one. Around the rest of the car, like I said, very familiar styling, but being an M2, being the baby M car of the bunch, I think there are some styling bits that help it to make it feel a little bit more youthful, so to speak. And the first thing is the M colors that are sort of emblazoned on the side panel here, as you can see. So I mean, it's not a make or break feature, but it does help the car to feel a little bit more youthful and to remind you that you are in an M car. And these are of course the same colors that you find on the steering wheel stitching, you find on your M shifter, the stitch pattern right here, and of course also the same colors that you find on the seat belt. Let me get the seat belt over here. Really nice touch. So aside from being sporty, I think it also does have a touch of classiness in that sense. Like these customizations or these unique features does help to make the car feel a little bit cooler. Right now, I'm seated in, of course, the M seats that are available in M2, and these are generally very comfortable, I would say. I think past perceptions are that sports seats tend to be uncomfortable, but these are not like Recaro bucket seats, you know. These are properly engineered, or I mean, not to say that Recaro ones aren't, but these are not track seats, so to say. They are sports seats. So if you're going for a B-road drive, or you're going for a more spirited drive, these will hold you in quite nicely. They're also very presentable looking, and they are generally quite comfortable, even on long distance driving actually. So and specific to the M2, of course, there are M2 logos on the seats as well. So these are specific to the M2, and of course this has the color as well. There are back seats in the rear, and actually sitting right here, the whole car does really feel like an E92 in terms of the way the cabin is laid out. Even in terms of the transmission tunnel, there's this little bit of center storage here, and of course you've got two seats that will seat an adult quite comfortably, but perhaps not for overly long and extended periods of time. Children will be very comfortable. So I myself, I have an E92 320 which shares a very similar shape, and my daughter is pretty comfortable at the back of the car on most days. But enough about the cabin. I think the main point about a car like that is the way it drives. So without any further ado, let's hit the roads and find out how the BMW M2 performs on the road. Alright, so now we are about to get on the roads in the BMW M2, and let me just reach back and get my seatbelt first. So unlike the cars of old, So in like a E92 M3, you get this little protruding arm that feeds the seatbelt to you. You don't have that in this car, but that's all well and good because I think the B pillar seems to be a little bit further in front, so it is still possible to reach for it. But in any case, to get things started, what you need to know is that this BMW M2 runs a S58 engine, so pretty much the same thing as what you would get in a BMW M3 and M4, but it has been tuned down slightly to 470-ish horsepower, I believe, and that is good for about 550 Newton meters of torque, and this should get you 200 kilometers from zero in about 4.1 seconds. And of course, like I mentioned earlier, this is rear wheel drive only, so no four-wheel drive or all-wheel drive available on this car. But what is interesting to note is that on the M2, there is an option for you if you are keen. If let's say you are the sort of driving enthusiast that's very into the whole manual transmission thing, there is a Purist Pack option that gives you a manual transmission along with other goodies as well. I can't really remember what's exactly in the Purist Pack because it was some time ago that we attended the launch or the preview of the M2, and during that preview they did share with us that the Purist Pack does come with a whole bunch of other things or other options on the M2. But the main thing why anybody would get a Purist Pack to begin with is because they want a manual transmission, which is actually kind of really which is a funny thing because and obviously you have to top up money for that, right? You have to pay a little bit extra for the option. But I remember recently a friend was showing me a BMW brochure from the time of the E46, so quite a long time ago, maybe about 20 odd years ago. And back in the day, the manual option was always the cheapest option you could buy, and then the automatic options would be, of course, like a top up, or they would be a little bit more premium. But 20 years later, to fast forward to today, and everything seems to be inverted, because today, standard, the cars come with auto transmissions, and if you wanna be a little bit special, then you can pay extra for a manual transmission. How things have changed, huh? But in any case, that's just the way it is, so no much real point brooding about it. But it's just a little bit of an interesting sentiment, because I think generally speaking, the world has been shifting towards automatic transmissions. Even if you want to take a new, like, let's say you don't have a license today and you go to and you are trying to acquire your license through a driving school, you would also likely be learning driving on an automatic car. In fact, I think the number of cars available for the number of auto cars available for learning has increased so much. So today, a majority of the learner cars would be automatic, and only a handful would be manual. But back when I was learning my driving, most of the cars were manual transmissions, and then only a couple of cars or automatic cars were just starting to come into the picture. So there were maybe like 5 or 6 units in the whole driving school, and that enabled you to take your license in a automatic format if you should so desire. But in any case, I digress a lot. Going back to the car, so right now what I'm doing is I'm driving down a multi-story car park in Singapore, and this is, of course, I'm in my most comfortable setting, so everything is set to the most comfortable, least harsh, so to speak. And right off the bat, one of the things that you notice about the BMW M2 is how highly strung the car is. So whether this is a good or a bad thing, I leave that up to you. But generally speaking, it feels like there's just so much going on in terms of it feels like the car just really wants to go. There's like so much power that's packed under the bonnet, and I think it's not so much about the power as well, but also because the car is, of course, one of the smallest M cars you can buy today. But around car park driving speeds, I would say that this car is a little bit highly strung. And of course, even in its most comfortable settings. Suspension is still rather firm, and I think that's also due to the fact that the tires are quite large for a car this size. So you tend to feel everything on the roads, and especially on the front tires, you got 275s, 275 35 19s, I believe, and that's of course a car that's of course a tire setup that's going to allow you to feel quite a little bit of what's going on the road. However, I think a car like that, in terms of car park driving speeds, it's probably just something you have to kind of get over in order to assess driving out on the open roads. And once you get the car out on the open roads, then I think a lot of it becomes a lot better. So I'm still in the most comfortable settings, and you can already hear that there's quite a lot going on in the car. But one thing I really enjoy about the M2 so far is how tight and taut everything in the car seems to feel. I feel extremely connected to the car and to the road, which is, I think, a very good thing. It's a good thing if you are viewing this from a driver orientation standpoint. But of course, if you're looking at the BMW M2 as a comfortable family car, then I would probably advise you to look elsewhere, because this is probably not something that your Akong or Ama would consider to be livable from a day-to-day standpoint. But in any case, now, you know, that tightness and that tautness really does translate to a wonderful driving dynamic. You just feel steering is so direct in this car, and it's just such a pleasant thing to put around corners. And I must say, it really does feel a little bit like an E92, except of course the E92 M3 was naturally aspirated with a 4-litre V8, and this is of course turbocharged with a S58 inline 6. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the car into M2 and see how it does. That was pleasant. So what I've done with M2 is actually I have put the car, so M2 is the mode that I call like all show and no so the engine is in Sport Plus mode, so it's in its aggressive settings. Transmission has been sort of adjusted to a middle point, so not as aggressive as a full-on, so a little bit slower than the optimal or the fastest shift speed you can program into your setup. So it's a little bit more comfortable on the gear shifts. It's not so violent, it's not so instant. It's more drivable in terms of city roads. And I've set the suspension to comfort, because we're not really chucking this car around corners at the moment. We're just driving around, and of course we're gonna make the sound as loud as we can, as possible, which I think you know, call it childish or whatever you may want to, but it's a lot of fun to drive, and you're able to extract very pleasant exhaust notes even at a fairly pedestrian pace, like say like 60-70 kilometers per hour, like I'm doing now. I'm doing 50, and if you're accelerating from these sort of speeds, you still get a wonderful sound. But of course, if you are tracking this car, or you are trying to put this car around around more bends, then I would suggest that you firm up your suspension settings to the full-on sports mode, which I'm going to do right now, to put the car into M1, which I've preset with firmer suspension settings. But before we do that, as sort of the final part of our review, I just want to talk a little bit about the car you know, earlier on I spoke about its handling as well. So the entire car feels very tight, very like it feels very connected to the driver. But it must be said that this car does feel a lot heavier than its predecessor. In fact, BMW says that this car is now weighing in at about 1.7 tons. And a car like that should really at most be about 1.5 tons. But then again, I think in a modern context, it's always good to consider that consumers are also a little bit more picky today. You know, you're not just really buying this car for track use per se. It's not just a track car, or it's not just a performance car. It's also a BMW. And I think BMWs people expect BMWs to come with a certain level of luxury. And I think that's where all the weight comes in terms of luxury fittings, soundproofing, sophisticated suspension systems. All these things do add to the weight. But in any case, let's go for one final run on a full-on sports mode. What a responsive engine. Oh, that is truly satisfying. So obviously we're not going to be driving around like that all day, but you know, if you take this car up to some of Malaysia's B roads, it's going to be an absolute blast, because I think on a windy road, I would much rather have a car like the M2 than something larger like say the M3, M4 or the M5. This is probably the most nimble of the lot. Alright, so when you're done with all of that, then essentially you can bring the car back to its most comfortable settings and let it settle down as if nothing has really happened. So if you have any other questions about the BMW M2 that I have not covered, be sure to leave your questions in the comment section below. I'll be more than happy to answer them. And before we go, if you are a driver in Singapore and thinking about selling your car for the best price possible or consigning it for the best price possible, because maybe you have this urge to buy a BMW M2 now, be sure to check out the link in the description box below, because through that link we'll be able to provide you with the best possible price and valuation for your used car. So be sure to check that link out if you're interested. It's completely free to inquire. And if you have enjoyed this review or have found it useful in any way, shape or form, be sure to give this video a like and consider subscribing to the channel, because we would greatly appreciate it if you help to boost our subscriber numbers. We have new reviews coming out every week as well, so if you're a car fan, be sure to tune in for all those reviews as well. And if not, as usual, please take care of yourself, stay safe, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye.